welcome you to the June Boston FinTech Meetup. Tonight we'll be discussing payment startups. We've got a great panel of folks that are going to share their experience and their thoughts around this space. So that'd be very exciting. Before we dive into that, I wanted to call out a few people who made this event happen tonight. So first and foremost, Sarah Biller, who everybody here knows, has started Boston FinTech. Was going to be here tonight. She's not able to be. She's going to be watching it via live stream, which the GSV team is doing a great job of pulling together. She's watching it either via live stream from Chicago, O'Hare, or a plane in between Chicago and Boston because she got grounded for weather today and wasn't able to make it. So, Sarah, if you're watching this, give us a thumbs up icon on the live stream. I also wanted to thank Seth Haubin, and the whole GSV Labs team for hosting us tonight. I'll have Seth come up in a few minutes and say a few words, but we love having events in this space. It's a great space. The kitchen's right here. There's chairs. It's awesome. So thank you, Seth, for having us again. We love it. And I also wanted to thank Holly Weckler and the Yodlee team for sponsoring tonight. So we'll have Holly come up and say a few words as well. Before I do that, just a quick roadmap to the evening. So as I mentioned, we'll have Seth and then Holly come up. We'll kick it to the panel. The panel will go through their discussions. We'll learn a ton of stuff about payments. Then after that, we'll do some Q&A. We'll have Gene Donnelly from FinTech Sandbox come up at the very end and talk for just a few minutes about the Boston FinTech Week, which is coming up in September. It sounds like it's forever away, but it's right around the corner. And then we'll break and should have time for some networking back in the kitchen on the other side of the wall. So with no further ado, let me turn it over to Seth.
Thanks, Orb. Hi, everyone. Just a quick welcome from GSV Labs. Super excited to have the panel and group here tonight. For those who aren't familiar with us, GSV Labs is a global innovation platform that helps accelerate startups and connects corporations to innovative business models and technologies. And what all that means is we work with both startups as well as enterprises. On the enterprise side, we do digital transformation, digital consulting, internal innovation, external innovation, innovation scouting. And on the startup side, we have 2 innovation centers. So you're in the Boston Innovation Center, 22,000 square feet. We have 45 of Boston's most promising tech startups working out of the space. So think founder-friendly workspace that provides resources that more resemble an accelerator, but in an on-demand fashion. All of that's powered by our digital platform, Passport, where entrepreneurs can go on and access the tools and the resources to potentially help them reach their potential faster. So that's a little bit about us. If you have any questions, feel free to grab us after the program. Myself, Kara, and our intern squad here working the live stream tonight. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and just super excited to have a great panel here and have a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Scott. Hi, guys. My name is Holly Weckler. I work for InvestNet Yodlee. I wanted to ask a quick question before I get started. Who out there actually knows Yodlee? All right. Nice representation. I like that. And so that most of you will understand, before I get started, being a company out of Silicon Valley, I want to let you all know my disclaimer. I'm here on behalf of myself. Everything I say tonight is not I guess you could say in print from Yodlee, but just trying to get you guys an idea of what we're looking for. So now that that has been said, I'm very excited to be here. I've been working with the Boston FinTech community and Sarah since 2015, I believe. Our first event was just a few of us with beers, pizza, and we were really trying to build this community. So for me today to hear it was 285 registrations, I believe, Gene. I mean, that's just amazing to see how much this community has grown. And, we just feel very welcomed every time we come to, come here and help Boston and learn from you guys. It's a very different community than most of the ones I visit for work. So one of the most exciting, moments for me tonight is this is one of our incubator roadshow stops. So if you guys haven't heard of our incubator, I would love to tell you more about it later. But high level, it's a 6-month program. You actually do not have to relocate, because we understand in FinTech sometimes you can't really uproot your life and your family. We don't take any equity, and it's stage agnostic. So we give you our product for up to a year for 1 million users for free, in addition to connecting you with a number of VCs and other mentors in the industry. So that's high level. You can ask me about it, and I'm going to throw it to Jean as well. If I'm not here, she also knows all about the program. So with no further ado, I'm not only a sponsor, but I'm a panelist. So I'm gonna hand this over to Denise.
Thank you, Holly. So for anyone standing in the back, there's room in the front if you want to come over. So we are very happy to have our June meetup on a very interesting topic of payments, and specifically the real-time payments that we have been seeing the most disruption in the banking world. It's more than $1 billion sector in the hub, and according to the recent Forbes article, it is going to become a reality in the largest adoption predicted for 2019. So without further ado, I want to introduce our distinguished panelists. We have Peter Gordon, Head of Growth in PayFi. We have Frank Makrides, CEO of Tunnel, and Holly introduced herself, but I love her title. She is an API FinTech Jedi. That's the best title I have ever seen. Heard? And
Good question. No, not the dark side. Don't we like compliance?
and Peng Cho, partner at Mendoza Ventures. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves, give a little bit about background of what your companies do, your journey in the payments world, and we'll start with you, Peter.
Great. Well, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I think you're How's that? Wow. Well, great. Well, I'm excited to be here. It's amazing. I started my career 30 years ago down on High Street in technology and payments with Blue Cross Blue Shield. It was an outsourced contract with EDS back in the day. And so I've been on this real-time payments journey for 30 years, and I have a pretty unique background working for both banks, FinTechs, the largest FinTechs, starting my own consulting companies. I ran payments for FIS, I've run payments for Santander. I've run payments for Citizens. I've run 2 consulting companies. The last one, I sold one to FIS, and I sold the last one to PayFi. And I think the most unique thing I did is I started a community bank in Newton and Wellesley called First Commons Bank, which we sold last March to Brookline Bank. And I was a founder of that and remained on the board for 9 years. And so those experiences really bring me to where we are today, which is why we're all in the room here, and that the FinTech, financial services, is broken. I've explained to some people, there's a lot of what I'll say front-end people here. My expertise is I'm a middle and back office kind of guy. I know how the shit really works, and that's just because I grew up on data. I grew up on things. The UI, UX, I leave to other people who are far smarter and far more intuitive than I am with how consumers work. And so I'll just leave it with payments. 2 things. If you take nothing else away from me today, since I'm a middle and back office guy, it's nothing. Real-time payments is a bad name or misnomer. It's about the data, number 1. It's about the data, number 2. It's about the data, number 3. Remember that. So it's really about the interaction and how you move messages between consumers or really businesses. And I'll leave you with the stats. So, people are concerned about, I also work for Mastercard, that little company. And I was a real-time payments evangelist, whatever that means. And that, so think about it. There's $30 trillion of carded payments globally. There's $120 trillion of money movement between financial institutions. So that leaves everyone in the room a $90 trillion opportunity for us to figure out how to create products and services to meet that demand. And that's what it's about. Real time is a nice characteristic about moving money, but think about it. the wire system was created 50 years ago. How many people have done a wire, truly done a wire? How many people think it's real time? Aaron, I don't think it's real time. Have you ever seen the Santander in Reading, Pennsylvania? And they're, it's real time when the clerk hits send. It's not real time to get the information in and then to get it. So it's just the point of, we have I think 15 characters or 16 characters that can go in a wire. It's really about moving to the next generation and having 2 gigs of data moving over the payment system versus a card transaction today. So it's about the data.
Thank you, Peter. So I do not have the payments background that Peter has. I would say we're more of a tech fin, heavily focused on technology, and my background is not in the financial services sector, but our team is very strong from that standpoint. So again, my name is Frank Makrides. I'm the founder and CEO of Tunnel. My background goes 20 years back in the technology space. I've lived through the dot-com cycles. I've lived through the telecom cycle. Saw some amazing exits and some really big failures. So I've been very fortunate in my career from that standpoint. I've also worked at some large Fortune 500 companies. I previously worked at Cisco Systems and was in U.S. Defense at BAE Systems for over a decade, where I led and participated and was part of some very large multi-billion-dollar defense initiatives with some really cutting-edge technology. So from there, I got really heavily involved in distributed ledger technology going back to 2012. I got heavily involved in this space and helped co-found, I think Eric's in the audience somewhere, the Boston Blockchain Association, a little shout out there, and been an advisor and working with a lot of blockchain related and distributed ledger technology related initiatives here in New England and throughout the United States and the world. And out of that was more of a frustration of the fact that there hasn't really been a technology stack as of yet to deliver on the vision of what DLT was always intended to do, which was to provide a payments platform that can actually be used globally, that can be compatible with the financial institution models that we have out there today. So that's what we set out to do from day one, build a real-time cross-currency payment platform, and that's what we've done. We've been up and running now on the cloud. Our platform runs on AWS. We've been running on that now for a year and a half in pretty much a production mode, and we're talking with some of the largest banks and financial institutions, some here in Massachusetts and around the world. So we're pretty excited about what we're doing, and we can't wait to get our product out in the market.
Thank you.
Hey, hello again. Hey guys, as mentioned earlier, my name's Holly. When I started, I talked to you about Yodlee, but it's kind of an interesting point of how I even got to Yodlee. As we're here with, Boston FinTech, I don't know any of you out there who are, diehard FinTechers that might know Jason Henricks. He's actually my mentor and used to be a big guy here in Boston. I actually helped him start FinTech Chicago. Yeah, okay. So yeah, as did I. We just hired an intern today at FinTech. I did remotely, but he's training them. So that's actually how I got hired. Was Yodlee came and was like, you actually know people in Chicago. Maybe you can do Chicago and New York. And now we've branched out into multiple cities. So it's really exciting to be here with you guys today, talking about what Yodlee can do for payments. I would say that a lot of what we do within the payment space is actually enabling innovation within the tools for payment companies to get their mission completed securely and compliantly. We don't actually do money movement ourselves, but as you were mentioning KYC, as we were talking before this, we'll have that follow-up combo about what we can do with our account verification API, which I'll get into later, but definitely don't want to waste too much time on these intros. We've got a lot of really great questions, so excited to talk to you all after. If you have any API questions, happy to help you with that.
Thank you. My name is Pong. I'm partner at Mendoza Venture, So we are early stage startup VC funds, and we invest in fintech, AI, and cybersecurity. That's why I'm here today, right? So before my lightsaber turned a little shade of red, I was blue too, right? So, and I was actually at PayPal for 5 years. And so like before I came, Adrian and I are partners, and then we talk about like why so many people want to do payment, why so exciting about it. I lived it for 5 years. So now you ask me about PayPal, I don't know Peter Thiel. I don't know. I don't know why your payment gets stuck, because mine gets stuck too, okay? So I can't fix it for you, okay? If your payment gets stuck in your PayPal account, don't reach out to me. I don't know, okay? Because mine happened too, okay? So, and I asked him, like, why so many people want to do payment? And he said, like, well, you know, there's a bunch of guys over there in Newton, and sold the company to PayPal for $250 million. That's why. Oh, okay, I guess so, right? So that's what we did. And 5 years ago, PayPal bought our company, and we have a pretty nice, interesting exit, right? So, and kind of switch back, jumping forward to now, we are doing investment in payment company, fintech company, AI company. We are one of our investment just closed an A round for $11 million, and we're doing another round, closing anytime now for another company that in the fintech space, based in London, in blockchain settlement. So I've done a lot of things in PayPal, not in back office, all on the front end. And so any PayPal app that you have touch on, like your Venmo app, your PayPal payment app, your PayPal Here app, or anything related to that, I have something to do with it. But if you don't like it, doesn't matter. I don't care anymore. So, okay. So that's my quick and shortest introduction for myself.
So while you still have the microphone, we'll get started with the first question. Is so in other countries, in other parts of the world, the traditional forms of the payments are not as deeply as in the United States, and we were talking about this right before the panel.
Yeah, okay.
We were talking about that credit and debit card use and cash together is still significant in the United States, but we use much more credit and debit cards depending on your area. But in contrast, 40% of the in-person spending in China is done with digital wallets and non-bank platforms. Okay. And actually, a recent thing that I have experienced, we were in Norway, and it's moving to a cashless society with a target date, with a goal and a target date, very actionable. And when you visit to different parts, they actually tell you it's cashless here. Yeah. So having said that, what needs to happen for U.S. To catch up with farther east and Europe? What is the current state of the payments in U.S.? And I'm actually going to open it up for everyone. But
just start with me, right?
Yeah,
because
you have the microphone. and we talked about it right before.
Yes, so I can just. So I think the first question I asked, actually, that everybody here, and including myself, is that why using a credit card is so behind as compared to using a phone, right? I got my meal pay, I got my lunch pay, okay? Whether using card, cash, or phone is, to me, as an end user, really have not much of a difference, right? Now,
yeah. But but I mean that's really been the landscape in the U.S. where other than a couple of pretty dramatic ingenuities, I would say, have come out of the U.S. A couple of companies. So RippleNet has been one where they've trying to use blockchain technology. So again, Tunnel is not a blockchain. We are a true DLT. We're a high performance DLT. We're not a cryptocurrency. We're none of that stuff. We're a bank compliant, financial institution compliant, high performance distributed ledger. If anyone wants to talk about our tech stack, please see me after. It's really cool. And then you also have the clearinghouse with real-time payments. So they've actually trademarked the word real-time payments. So no one can actually even use the word real-time payments anymore because the clearinghouse is done. So those have been really other than RippleNet, I think, and and what the clearinghouse has done. Everything else that I've seen out there is more or less just APIs for the last so many years. And I think the US market and the global market are ripe for innovation, leveraging digital wallet technology and crossing borders and currencies and providing value not only domestically but globally. I think that's where I see the trends going, and there was a lot of demand for that down in payments, and there were a lot of discussions and talks about that. So anyways, that's my perspective on it.
So I'm just going to play off the rail. So the rails are broken, right? So if we have, there was this guy, Bessemer, like he's a Boston guy. He created steel that we run new rails because the rails were so soft they couldn't handle the cars. So back to where we are today. The rails can't handle the data. I go back to this. A card transaction is an 8583, and we did at FIS, we created PayNet, which is the first real-time payment network. I started that network, but it still was 8583. And then I was on the steering committee for the Fed, and we put out the criteria for what real-time payments is all about. And we landed on the ISO 20022 because it's rich data, it's globally, and that's what we're on the journey to do now. I think the clearinghouse has made a lot of, when I was at Santander, I was on the board of the clearinghouse. They're one of the 22 owners. And it's really about enabling the banks to, in the US, we can talk globally. I do, we'll use India or China as the example. The reason why it works in India, if you've been in India, nothing works in India. No disrespect to anything, but one thing works is the payment system. Why? You go through this, like, you're in a taxi from the airport, you're sweaty, you're in this cramped little thing. The guy rolls down his window, he takes out his phone going through the toll booth. He clicks on this, like, disgusting, dirty piece of paper that you can't even make out what it is, but it's a QR code. It works. And you're like, dude, why? If you can do this in India, why can't you do this in downtown Boston? So that's a Paytm. The reason why it works is because the government said, this is the data you'll use. This is the standard you'll use. This is the rail you'll use. Here in the US, in India, because Modi said, we're going to take the money out of the system, we're going to demonetize, we're going to put in new rails. He created the Bessemer project, right? He fixed the rails so the big freight cars can go down it. It's a utility in India. Here in the US, we have these big companies, Visa and Mastercard and FIS and Fiserv and WorldPay, and they don't want things to change. And I worked for those companies. They will change, trust me. They'll change when one of us in the room disrupt that system, and then they'll buy us, and that's great. And that's how it works. Remember, we have almost 9,000 banks in the US. There's no other market in the world that has such a diverse banking system in the US, so we all have to agree. And I do think the clearinghouse is, by the end of the year, they'll have probably 50 banks on board. I joined a company, I sold my consulting company to PayFi to enable banks, and they have a platform. Ex-FIS guys built it in India. They're connected to the clearinghouse, they're connected to the card rails, and we're gonna do payment optimization between the different rails to where today it's not perfect. People think you can do a card push transaction. They don't all work. Why? Because there's rules. You can't do a transaction that's over $9,999 on the card rails. What if you want to do a $35,000 transaction? Well, it doesn't work over the clearinghouse. It doesn't work over the card rails. You have to go a wire. You have to do same-day ACH. So our rails are broken, but that is where we're going, is we're on this journey, and I think in the next 3 to 5 years, the Fed will get around. They're not going to make any, the Fed will say, I'm a banking guy at heart because I hate regulation, but it's unfortunate we're in this world, it's banking. So I believe that once one of us solve it, the regulators will follow behind and will support what we're doing. And so I'm really bullish on the real-time payments from the clearinghouse because it's rich data. You can send messages over the network. It's payments. It does do real time, but again, that's only a characteristic of the rail. So that's where we're at, and I think we're still in the early innings. It's probably the bottom of the second, moving to the top of the third, And, that's good news for everyone in the room. We have, 7 innings, or so to go to make real-time payments a reality in the U.S.
So since we talked about APIs, I'm going to turn it over to Holly. What types of APIs and tools have the payment entrepreneurs historically used from your perspective?
So this question, I wanted to kind of go back a little further. For those of you out there who know Yodlee, we started back in 1998. That's a little bit before my time in the financial services industry. Okay, when we were creating cloud deployment solutions. So I actually reached out to one of my colleagues who used to work at the banks. And I was like, I know, when I started at Yodlee, everyone was so excited that our SOAP APIs had RESTful wrappers. And for me, coming from like someone who was more in the developer world, like recruiting devs, that wasn't good. I was like, I can't tell people that and smile. Like, I could only, sell something I believe in. And when we started, they were super excited that they were moving towards, like right now, fully RESTful APIs. But back then, I don't know who's out there still in the financial service industry. There's a lot of people still using SOAP APIs. Like, RESTful is still a dream. Yodlee accomplished that within the first, I should say, 6 months I was there. But what he told me is once upon a time, the first thing people would try and do is basically what we have is like an alternative option is just your manual entry, right? So you have to either know the account number, try and do it where you're dealing with so much human error, right? And then they got really excited that the next thing that they were going to move to was mailing in checks. And here I am like, mailing? I don't know the last time I bought stamps. Like, I mail any checks from Chase. I go to the Chase QuickPay, the banking option. And then the last thing that kind of clicked for me, which is, I guess, would bring us into more up to date where we are today, was when they tried to do the verification deposits. But the big problem with that was a lot of people didn't actually log in to check it. Was it 17 cents? Was it 19 cents? And if you didn't log in during this certain window, it was lost. Nowadays, we all know we're all attached to our phone, looking at it all the time. But at this point, this was, back probably before dial-up or AOL and all that fun stuff. So I would say it's really exciting to hear the challenge deposits, which brings you to the biggest aspect of, in my opinion, where Yodlee can help is with our account verification API. We're actually able to instantly verify, you are who you say you are, handle your KYC compliance pieces. And while we don't do the money actual money movement, we have a lot of payment companies that are on our platform that are not only using our instant account verification, but also using our aggregation API. Recently, we also came out with OK to Spend APIs, which I think are really interesting as well, kind of helping with the budgeting. But outside of just speaking about Yodlee, I would think the ones that are really interesting to me would be Braintree, PayPal, and Square. All three of these are kind of helping you with kind of some different aspects of the actual process, the journey, as Denise has mentioned it. But there's so many other API platforms out there. Jean, I'm sure, has a bunch on her platform at FinTech Sandbox that she could discuss as well.
Thank you. So let's move to a little bit to the. So we talked about current state and we talked about challenges a little bit. Let's move to the some of this data, intersection of data and payments. One of the things we were talking about was the security and identity for real-time payments. This seems to be something that's coming up. So the question will be, from your perspective, could you talk about some of these inherent risks? And also from a venture perspective, if the venture firms are still investing into payments, knowing some of these risks.
Yes, we are. We are investing in payment space. We are investing in the security space, right? So I think one of the challenge is that in terms of payment security is much more of the fraud detection. And in fraud detection, there's a lot of challenges in terms of false positive, right? Mm-hmm. I kind of go back to PayPal, right? And you guys probably see a lot of, you have a PayPal account, and all of a sudden, how come your funds get help? Nobody seems to be able to explain that, right? And that's the kind of the black box issue. And a lot of time you reach out to the risk security team. It's like, why is that? And sometimes it's just very hard to explain. And I think that's one of the challenge. And we would like to see that being solved. Like why certain payment are not approved, and why does that Visa approve it and PayPal don't, right? So and there's a lot of fraud detection able to say, well, okay, are you that guy? Or even the card is right. And so a lot of that is very important, especially as we go into much more of the mobile payment, cardless payment, all of that, right? Are you who you are, right? So if somebody can have a very effective way of solving that, it's a great opportunity.
Yeah. And Frank, I think you had some ideas on that.
I think Pong set me up very well. Thank you, Pong. So there's definitely a lot of white papers out there talking about accelerating the time of payment and getting closer to true T0, and multiple orders of fraud that would increase in relation to that. Into that, most of the payments today, and I think Peter hit it on the head, are not data rich. And they're still based on a lot of legacy forms of movement that are 40 to 60 years old that are causing a lot of the fraud. So even if you have a lot of payment ingenuity today, for example, Venmo had $40 million of fraud in Q1 of 2018. Zelle is bleeding in fraud. Everyone knows about wire fraud and ACH fraud, and everyone's lived with someone stealing their credit information and having to file a police report or talk to your credit card company and say, these weren't my charges and all that. So we started with that at the fundamental and understanding, how do you change the way you can interact and do a value transfer and de-risk that up front. So on our platform, we do something very unique, and we actually base it all around a digital identity. So instead of doing fraud management, we want to do fraud elimination to the best, or mitigation as much as possible. So by de-risking the two parties from a value transfer standpoint and having trust in the value transfer up front. So instead of doing an account transfer to an account transfer, we actually do it from, let's say, Frank to Peter. And there's confidence that I am who I am and Peter is who he is. And we tokenize that in a digital form. So if you move or you change your banking information, you get married, you change your last name, we're completely agnostic to that. And all the bank and FIs that we've been talking to, financial institutions, love that, because a lot of times that's the final check in the value transfer stream, whether you're doing a wire internationally and all these messages are going through, and at the end it gets rejected for some crazy AML, OFAC, or whatever the case may be. We do that up front. So that's why we can get as close as we can to T0, and that's why we don't do fraud management. We are in the business of fraud elimination to the best of our ability.
So I'm conscientious of the time we have, so I'm going to have one final question and then open it up for question and answers from the audience. So this is, as the panelists already know, that this is something dear to my heart. So who's left behind when payments are fully digital? Is the cashless society inclusive, in your opinion?
So, I said this up front, so I won't spend a lot of time on this. The closer we get to consumers, that's not my world. But I'll tell you from a banking perspective, the reason with real-time payments is trying to bring the small community banks back into the marketplace. And traditionally, as you know, that the top 4 banks control 60% of the flow of payments in the U.S. today. And really, I think real-time payments, this next generation, is democratizing. Just like the internet did, that's what payments is about. I just want to go, I'll leave you at this. I was trying to think of the data. Most of you in the room, if you're in technology, just think of a spec that's 40 or 50 years old that you've passed on from generation. That's what a card is today. I don't think people appreciate And so if you just Google what an ACH transaction, you won't believe. It's still a flat file. It's 150 characters. And every character is told what, depending what you're doing, is told what it can do. And there's only like 15 characters you can talk to on a card. And that's why things fail. It's not a surprise if you understand the data and you understand the rails are broken. And again, that's what real-time payments or the next generation, laying the new rails from the clearinghouse. That's what it's about, is putting in a rich data pipe. And then we can do these amazing things that Pong talked about in AI, and we can look at it, because just think, you can put 2 meg of messages. So think of a tweet that has already been defined for 40 years, and you only have not 160 characters, what it is, but 15 characters you can say what you want. Our messages would get crossed. But think of an email in the new way. You have a subject line, you have a to person, you have a from person, you have your signature, you have the IP address where it's coming from. All that data can be encapsulated in the payment. And I know we've talked a lot about consumer stuff, which again, I'm not a consumer guy. It's all about taking checks out of the system. It's the B2B world. It's the stuff, again, $70 trillion, $90 trillion of commerce that is still to be disrupted, that we're talking about moving over these pipes that are primarily ACH and check today.
So there are 2 sectors that come to mind when you go to cashless that get left behind. One are the criminals, and the other one are tax evaders. No, I'm just joking. I'm just going to echo what Peter said. I think money movement is going more towards a ubiquitous experience, like an email, where there's going to be a way that you can, instead of sending a message to anyone, anywhere in the world, real time, at almost no cost or zero cost. I see that same ubiquitous experience coming to payments, and we're excited to enable that technology with Tunnel. That's something we've been working very hard on for quite some time, and I think that's something that's needed in the marketplace. So I think digital payments is where the world's going, and I think we are in that second inning, getting into the third.
I would say I agree, but also I think that there's a lot of companies out there that are working to help, like not leave people behind. I'm going to give a plug for a Chicago company that I'm, really care about. I've seen them since they launched, Pangea. I don't know if anyone out there knows them, but they're actually working to help the underbanked. They're working to help people. Maybe it is a bit of tax evasion, as you mentioned. Some people who, might not fully be citizens, et cetera. There are some outliers, but they actually, they're when they first started, that was kind of their test market, and now they're using KYC compliance tools to make sure you know who the person says they are, where this money is going, right? So they're kind of working to make sure that people aren't left behind, and there's other companies out there. I think that the big problem that I'm seeing is how everyone communicates. And I guess I was looking up developer jokes earlier, and this one I feel like really kind of fits, right? So it's how many developers does it take to change a light bulb? The answer, none. That's a hardware problem. Right? So this I know it's cheesy, but it's funny to me. But obviously I'm a dork and love my job. But that's when I was looking at it today. It's that's where I see the big problem. Yodlee, we're trying our best to help enable companies to do this compliantly, hit everything that FDIC and everyone wants you to do. But if we don't have the point of service and we don't have the ways they can do it, and with Pangea, they've actually made their way into 7-Eleven. They actually have cards now, and there's different ways. Maybe there'll be machines soon, or I don't know. I think the biggest thing is we've got an option, and I'm passionate about it too. I don't want to see anyone left behind. So I think it'd be great to work together to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you. And Pong, I'm actually going to open the for questions from the audience, because I'm conscientious that we're going to be, this is a great conversation, and we can talk about another hour. Yes. So any questions?
Do you want to hang on to that? So what we'll do is I'll run around with the mic. If you guys want to be on the
So it's the oldest FinTech in the world. It was started in 1857. And today they do, there's only two organizations that move money between banks in the US, the Federal Reserve and the Clearinghouse. And the Federal Reserve does ACH and wire, and the Clearinghouse does ACH and wire. And the Clearinghouse, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, asked for $3.5 million from each of their owners. I wrote that check at Santander, and they created a new rail. And so they're laying the pipes. And very similar to in India, where the government said, this is how you'll do it, the Clearinghouse said, this is how we're going to do it. But there's no mandate from the government. So now, collectively, we have to use those rails. They just started rolling it out. It's still early days. And I believe that will be one of the rails. And I'm absolutely believe there'll be more rails than that, but that is a good first start. And that is the one that's the early adopter and catching a lot of steam because the large banks have all committed to it today. Did that answer your question? Partially. What was the other piece?
Can I? Yeah. Do you mind if I add to that, Peter? So, I was a early Bitcoin evangelist, and I still believe in decentralized assets. Just to be clear, to go back to Peter's point, I think there's Swift moves about $5 trillion a day, and in 250 work days a year, it's $1.25 quadrillion, right? So it's a pretty decent marketplace, and that's just Swift. So I think there will always be room in the market for decentralized assets, specifically where you are in the world. So if you're in Venezuela and you're in a tough situation, and you happen to be mining Bitcoin to feed your family, I think there is an opportunity there. Where is Bitcoin going to be 5 or 10 years from now? It could evolve to something where it's an option in the marketplace. Is it ready yet for prime time for payments? No. A lot of these decentralized assets, even if they're stable coins, you probably heard of things called stable coins, they still fluctuate in price. So some of them are pegged to $1, they're pegged to €1, but they fluctuate about 5, plus 5, or minus 5, about 10%. And then you got to go sell them on an exchange, and then that's a taxable event. And if you're a business that accepts it, it's a taxable event, and paperwork and nonsense and all that stuff. So I still think there will be some place for those assets. I do see Tunnel as an alternative rails. I think RTP is very cool. You have SEPA in Europe, which is a very similar system that RTP was based on. It's more of a hybrid between SEPA and what the Australian rails are like. But if you ever use it, it's terrible. IBAN, and you're praying you can't reverse the transaction. We want to do value transfer. You won't do it with RTP. But there will be a place for RTP. There's a place for credit. There's going to be a place for all these systems. And I think it's going to be very interesting times over the next couple of years to see where they all play up. It's a big marketplace, and everyone's going to find their swim lane. I hope that answered your part of the question. Yeah.
Hi. So thank you so much for your sharing. And you just compare the digital payment in China and the credit card system in America. So America have a long-established social security system, which build a very good relation between the bank and the people. However, China just started to build its own credit system in recent years. And there's so many debate, controversial from the public and society. Do you think those issues will overshadow the future of the digital payment in China, or American with a more advanced, more secured and credit system will be able to catch up the East countries that in the near future?
My answer is very simple. China is China. It's not America, right? So in the past 30 years, China has gone from almost nothing to today. It's a great miracle by itself. But we all have to be mindful, China is China. We eat Chinese food. We call them food, not Chinese food. So it's different, okay? So you know, it's like a lot of things that apply here doesn't apply there, right? Okay. And actually, we don't eat dogs, okay?
What do they call cheeseburgers? No.
We have no, it's called cheeseburger.
What impact do you think Facebook will have? Their pending release of the Facebook. Yeah, impact of Facebook's entry.
Okay, so Facebook tried this 10 years ago with their own virtual currency. So this isn't their first run at the game. And just because it's Facebook doesn't mean it's going to succeed. There's not a lot of information. There's some tidbits of what they're trying to do. So my understanding of this, and I might be wrong, on the streaming people, don't beat me up on this. There's also been a lot of contradiction in what they're trying to come up with. So my understanding is it's an Ethereum-based. Ethereum, if those who don't know it, it's like a Bitcoin. It's a cryptocurrency, and you can create tokenized assets on it. And these tokens that they're looking to create will be stablecoin type tokens, and I think they're looking at a handful or more currencies around the world, and then that would interface to their messaging app. WhatsApp, and you'll be able to make payments through these stable coins, and then you'll be able to buy and sell them on exchanges. And I think Peter and I already said this, I think others on the panel, I think there's going to be room for a lot of different players, but just because Facebook's name's in front of it, I think some people are actually really concerned. I think Facebook collects enough information on a lot of people, and now they want to capture payments too, which I don't blame them for trying to get into this. But again, it goes back to that user experience. It's a coin. You got to then go to an exchange, or you got to sell it. It could be a taxable event. It might fluctuate in price. No one really knows, because if it's truly going to be a decentralized crypto asset, anything is possible. So that's all I know about it. I don't know if anyone else here likes to add to that. But
the only other thing I'll add is, so there was a little company called Google, and they tried Pony Express. So Pony Express was supposed to revolutionize consumer bill pay. The reason why it didn't work, again, is because our rails are broken. So they're trying to get around the rails, and then when you try to get around the rails in the US, we have these things called regulators. They don't like that, so they try to push you back onto the rails. So this is why you guys are hearing the drumbeat. We need new rails, right? So that's why, and I'm not saying the clearinghouse will be the only one, but that's the one out the gate. And that's really important because regulators like it, because banks understand it, and there will be others. And so the thing is about what they're doing with Facebook, how do you get the money from a regulated bank account? Because, by the way, it's not Jesse James. I always use that and I get it wrong. So tell me who the bank robber is. Why did Jesse James rob the banks? Because that's where the money is, right? Facebook, you got to get the money from a bank account into Facebook. How do you do that? So real-time payments will be a way, using Tunnel, using Yodlee. So we're bridging between the regulated banking world. So will Facebook be successful? Absolutely. Will it take over the world of commerce? I don't think so. But it's good to exchange cash and exchange things.
Hi, good job, guys. Peter McNally from the Bentley UXC. So a point and then a question. So I think you asked about people being left behind. One group I would say to make sure you don't leave behind are folk with disabilities. So and that would include people who are older. So make sure whatever you develop is accessible. All right, that's the first point. And then a kind of related question, what do you see from UX challenges? I think, Frank, you were kind of touching on this and the complexity of the process, but from a UX standpoint for success for the end user and also the employees of the bank, what has to happen or not happen?
I can give an example.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, but just going off of what you kind of talked about with people with disabilities, Gene and I actually were talking about this earlier today, and one of the companies that use our platform is called Honest, but with an O, and what they're doing is they're actually trying to help people manage their elderly parents' finances, right? Because a lot of people are getting taken advantage. We've all heard these schemes that are out there, but how do you access that person's information if they are disabled, et cetera, right? There's a lot of legal paperwork that can go into that. So I would say that Yodlee is very conscious of this and of this demographic, and we've had a number of companies that are on our platform that are thinking about it. I'm gonna let Mark kind of take over from here, but wanted to make sure this is something also that's important to me too. I think it's something that we all have to think about, right? All of us out here are fintech professionals. It's important to, help the man make more money, but it's also important to find a way to do fintech for good and to help these people who can't fully help themselves, whether it's with financial literacy or tools like that. So thank you for bringing that point up.
So at Tunnel, we're really fortunate. We have probably one of the best people in the world on our advisory panel. And that's from a UX, UI standpoint. That's Greg Race from Raise Labs, currently RightPoint. He's made some of the most famous mobile and web platforms out there. Everyone's used them here, whether it's Macy's, Costco, or many other pretty large ones, and banks and other institutions. First question he asked me and kind of put into my head is, you need to make it such that your mother can use it. He's like, if your mother can't use it, no one's going to use it. And that was really an exercise. And that's something we worked hard on early on understanding how do you make something as basic and simple that anyone can interact with it. Now, is it someone that is just completely financially illiterate? Is it someone from a different age group or another challenge that they might have? So these are the things that we took into consideration early on, and we have built a lot of those features into our platform, and we're excited to get that online. And it needs to be simple, fast, easy, and those are the things that I think that resonate with us.
Just one quick one. So it's a good question, and I mentioned I'm not a UI guy, but I did partner with a company called OV Loop. It's a shout out. And Will Grayland, he sold his last company. He's our lead advisor. He sold it to Samsung for $200 million to become Samsung Pay. He's local. And he created the next generation app, voice enabled. So he combined voice and messaging together. And so I think when you can talk the next generation of Alexa, I think that's where we're at, is interfaces, because I don't get user interfaces, but I know how to talk. So I think that when we can do natural language, and we're getting there, we're not there yet, but I think that is when it will be inclusive.
So So we're on that note. Yeah.
Followed by my wife and daughter. They definitely don't listen to me.
So we are out of time, but our panelists will be around in the for another few minutes after the panel while we're doing the networking and enjoying our drinks. So with that, thank you very much to our distinguished panelists. I have a couple of announcements before we move on to the networking time. In addition to our distinguished panelists, thank you to Yodlee for the sponsorship and GSV for the space and live streaming. We really appreciate it. And I know I'm between you and some drinks, so I'll keep it quick. Our next meetup on July 9th will be a joint meeting with AI in Boston FinTech. This is the first meeting for AI in Boston FinTech, and this will be combined. So July 9th. And Jean will be coming over for an announcement. And you are the last one. I'm the last one.
Okay, I'm the last thing between you and drinks. So Boston FinTech Week, for those of you who don't know, is a week long of FinTech-focused events. Amazing panels like this. Hopefully we can continue the conversation and take it even further. It's September 9th through the 12th. The app is up on Splash. If you go Boston FinTech Week 2019, you'll start to see as things start to come together. So right now we're trying to get folks who want to be involved with the week. Last year we had 47 events, 3,000 people that came over the course of the week. So hopefully you guys can come and attend. We highly, highly recommend it, covering all the different sectors. So watch the space, I guess. And then if you want to get more engaged,